I'm less.
Perfect. Well, would you like to get us started then?
Oh, sure. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Danessa Tillis. I'm with the Resistance Indivisible CA7. We changed our name. We were the Indivisible, the Resistance Sacramento Elk Grove, but we changed our name over the summer. But then Facebook wouldn't let me change it. So anyhow, in my long struggle with Facebook, we are now the Resistance Indivisible Elk Grove CA7. So thank you for having us at your joint meeting.
And I am Nate Gilmore. I'm here with Indivisible Sacramento. And we've been fortunate enough to have the same name on Facebook. I still hate Facebook, so that's a problem. So we haven't done one of these in a while, but back in the early difficult days of 2017 when nobody knew what they were doing, we had a few joint meetings where we got both of our groups together in a giant middle school auditorium and had some pretty good meetings back then. So we're going to make sure that we work together whenever the opportunity presents ourselves.
Super excited about it. Because typically before we kind of split it up, there was a majority of Matsui people in his group and a majority of Bara people in my group. So we kind of split it up. But now that the groups have commingled so much, we have some Matsui, they have some Bara, so we're going to try to work together on a lot of holding our members of Congress and state electeds accountable. So I'm really looking forward to getting to know more of you that I don't already know.
So I don't know if everyone heard about this, but a few weeks ago there was an election. Quite a lot of elections across America, 435 House races, some Senate races, some governor races, and millions of local and state offices. So we thought we might talk a little bit about what happened.
That seems like a good idea.
And you had some information you wanted to present on that, Vanessa?
Yeah, you should start, because I have to find stuff.
Okay, sounds good.
Time.
So I'll start with, might want a moment of silence here for some of the people who are not going to be in elected offices next year. Scott Walker. Okay, it's more like a moment of loudness. Chris Kobach. Dean Heller. Paul Ryan. Orrin Hatch. Now, not everybody may know this name, but do you remember in Kentucky there was a clerk who refused to Kim Davis? What's that? The one who was challenging her one, yeah. Paul LePage, governor of Maine. And here in California, Daryl Issa. Jeff Denham. Rena Rohrabacher. And actually a whole bunch more congressional Republicans. You may remember last summer we had a guest speaker from a group called Flip the 14. The idea was we were going to knock all 14 Republican Congress members out from California. We didn't get all 14, but we got half of them. So it's a pretty good deal. The seventh one was just, it was made semi-official today. We're in District 21 in Central California. Ellen's clapping because she did some postcards there. DJ Cox pulled ahead of David Valadao, and they think that...
Our 2,000 postcards made a difference, so I think so.
And but it wasn't just the people who won elected offices. There were also some important ballot measures across the country. For example, 3 states expanded Medicaid: Idaho, Nebraska, and Utah. And in Florida, they passed, it was a question 4 or amendment 4 to re-enfranchise over 1 million people. Most of them were minor crimes, and they all paid their debt to society, and they have been re-enfranchised now, and they're actually allowed to vote now. What's that? Yeah, and I think it was something like a quarter of all black men in Florida were not allowed to vote because of this policy, and now it's been overturned. So that was a great victory.
Oh,
You think?
Yes, it was. It was definitely intentional. You want to?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so I have a few more highlights. So we flipped. Democrats won a total of 235 seats, and Republicans won 198.
Oh.
So, Democrats, sadly, after my Gatsby last night, it's the 48-52 Senate. But we were able to hold on to a lot of seats, which is nice, and we flipped a couple of key ones.
How did they do down ballot? Because they said, I was hearing last night that even though he didn't win, that he helped people down ballot. Is that
Oh yeah,
true?
but that's true in most
true
cases.
across
Yeah.
the
I
board.
just was wondering if there was any dramatic.
I don't think there's anything dramatic in
Okay.
Mississippi. We still
In
have
Texas.
in Texas. It was really good.
But not
In
Mississippi.
Michigan, there was a lot of help down ballot for some of the. There were several things were passed in Michigan. I think I have them on here.
Did I wonder what happened, what the end result was in Mississippi?
Oh yeah, Mike Epstein. I think it settled something at like 47.2% to the racist 52 point something. Yeah, Cindy
It
Hyde
is-
Smith.
It is Mississippi.
She lost. Yeah. Yeah. Mississippi chose white supremacy last night.
But that race is up again in 2020, so
Is he
Yeah.
gonna run it again? Is he gonna run that?
I don't
Possibly.
know.
He hasn't said.
No.
So you mentioned a few of the key House races.
Sorry.
That's okay. So I won't mention the key House races. But on the national landscape, in addition to Florida getting their rights restored, we had voting rights restored in Michigan. We also had a automatic voter registration voted on in Michigan, in Nevada, and Utah banned gerrymandering and is redistricting their districts to make them more fair. So that's exciting because voting rights are really, really important. Let's see. Immigrants' rights in Oregon, they defeated the state sanctuary repeal, so that Oregon remains a sanctuary state. Let's see. Wake County, North Carolina defeated a sheriff that used to had a 28-7G with ICE, and so they used to coordinate their efforts with ICE to allow ICE to come into their facilities and withhold detainees or arrest them. And so that sheriff was voted out of office, so that's a big win. In Massachusetts, they upheld an anti-discrimination law that was on the ballot for repeal. Reproductive rights prevailed in Oregon. They rejected an anti-choice measure. And in West Virginia and Alabama, they passed on some bad abortion measures that would have taken effect to limit reproductive rights in those states. And then in regards to the criminal justice system, Louisiana requires unanimous jury verdicts for felonies now, which is a big deal. Before, it just had to be a preponderance of them. So like 8 people could vote to convict somebody and 4 people could be against. That's not how it is in California. That is how it is in Louisiana. So that is not how it is anymore. Now it has to be a unanimous jury verdict for felonies specifically.
Kind of weird, but Oregon is now the only state that doesn't require unanimous.
That's
jury.
exciting. Oregon's, yeah, that is a weird thing. And then Washington passed some good police reform measures. So all good news. In California, 53 seats were called for Dems. This is kind of old, so I think it's actually 58 seats now were called for Dems. And we have 20 or 21 seats in the Assembly for Republicans, which means that we actually have a supermajority now.
Supermajority.
Yeah. We had a supermajority last time too, and then we had some people that had to step down because of some Me Too things. So we got our supermajority back, yes. In the Senate, the same thing. The state Senate, we also have a supermajority now. Now we have a supermajority just everywhere in California. Partisan offices were won by Democrats up and down the ballot, all the way across California. And we also got Tony Thurmond elected to state superintendent. This is a really, really, really tough place. Because Marshall Tucker would have been awful, and Tony Thurmond has passed some of the legislation that we fought for here in California. Yes, he did.
Oh, thank God.
So super exciting. And then I just wanted to give a few of the fun facts. So in this last election, we seated the first Muslim women in Congress from Michigan and Minnesota. The youngest congresswoman ever, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The first Native American women from Mexico. The first Black Congresswoman from Massachusetts. The first Latina Congresswoman from Texas. The first woman governor of Maine. The first woman elected governor of Iowa. The first openly gay governor of Colorado. The first openly gay man in Congress. The first openly lesbian mother in Congress. The first Black Congresswoman from Connecticut. The first Black Attorney General in New York. The first Democratic Latina governor of New Mexico. The most ever women in the House at 106. 7 new Black members of Congress and 19 Black women elected judges in the state of Texas.
Wow.
Pretty neat. And that's all I had.
It's interesting that you ended with Texas because I think that even in some places where we didn't win, we made some great strides. On election night, at first it was a little bit difficult to watch the news because actually the worst stuff happened right away. Beto O'Rourke lost, Stacey Abrams' race started looking bad, Andrew Gillum, all the superstars that we were kind of hoping for, a lot of them started to lose right away. But then the good news just kept on coming after that. And even in those races in Georgia and in Texas and in Florida, a lot of those places in the Deep South were places where the Democratic candidates had no infrastructure to start with, or very little infrastructure to start with. They built not only excitement and momentum, but they also built a lot of the infrastructure that's going to help candidates in 2020 and places like that. So we have reason to look forward with optimism even where things didn't work out the right way this year. And I'll say, before, you're probably sick of hearing from Danessa and I, and you want to hear from our guests and everything, but before that, I just want to call attention to some of the work that we all did to make this happen. None of this happened without effort for people across the country, but we were a big part of that.
How many people in this room sent text banks? Sorry. And how many people phone banked?
How many what?
Nice. How many people canvassed? Wow.
How many sent postcards?
Everyone.
I heard someone call postcards the gateway drug. You do postcards and you realize, hey, this is fun.
Yeah.
So then next
It's the
thing
first
you know, you're knocking
level
on
over
doors.
here.
How many people went out with our friends in District 4 or District 7, knocked on doors and tried to? All right.
Did anybody? I was up in Nevada for Heller. Did anybody come to me and I went, thank you. Yes, you guys are awesome.
We had more than that. Only a few hands that went up, but I know there were like a dozen of
We
us
also
in
did
Nevada.
10 too.
And yes,
Yeah.
so I was actually
Yeah.
going to mention that.
Oh.
In June of 2017, right after the House voted to destroy the Affordable Care Act, I was a little angry, and I opened our meeting with a tirade about some of the area Republicans who had voted for that, including one who I just kind of picked, not because I knew him personally, but because I saw he was close to us, was Representative Jeff Denham in the Modesto area. I was really mad, and talked about how many people in his district were going to be booted off of insurance if this thing passed. And I vowed that we would work to defeat him. And like 2 weeks later, we sent a team down there to knock on doors and just do some preliminary canvassing. Julie and Ellen did some work with the canvassing and voter registration down there, and you sent teams down there. We were working pretty hard in that district as early as last summer, and Jeff Denham lost. And that was really great. It was really great to see that work pay off. Okay, should we introduce our?
So yeah, we have a couple of really special guests. So I invited everybody to this meeting, and Chloe and Bobby, can you guys come up? Chloe Stryker she does something with National that covers a lot of places. So I'm going to let her introduce that, and Bobby is on the West Coast as well. So these are from Indivisible National, and they're going to talk to you about. We have on the sideboard a little bit about the new offensive strategy, and I also have don't steal these, but I have them on the sideboard as well, the new offensive strategy 2.0 and the state strategy guide that I'm going to put over here. So Chloe, Bobby, take it away.
Hi everyone. So I'm Chloe name is Stryker, and I am one of the West Coast organizers. I cover California, specifically in advocacy, as well as Alaska and Hawaii.
Hi, I am Bobby Michaels. I cover California in regards to training and sustainability. I also work with groups in Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana.
Wow.
So yeah, Chloe and I have quite a bit to cover. But I specifically work with you all in the areas of training and sustainability.
So he is a Sacramento resident, so maybe you can steal him for some of your upcoming meetings.
Yes, definitely.
I'm down in LA, but I love to make it up here as long as possible. I'm actually born and raised in Turlock, California. So thank you for helping me with CA10. It's absolutely unbelievable that Harder is now my congressman. I'm so excited. Never thought it would happen. I was actually one of those really cynical ones. Everyone's like, oh, CA10. I was like, no way, it's flipping. You've seen my hometown, it's never flipping. Proved me wrong, thank God. But I've actually been with Indivisible and working with California since last June. I originally started as the Northern California organizer. So I spent a lot of time in Sacramento, in the Bay Area, and in Northern California. And when we first started, it was completely, bleak. We were just trying to go day by day. Every day something crazy was coming down. We were responding. We couldn't really think to the future, like what's going to happen in 5 months, 6 months, like God forbid the electoral elections next year. We were just trying to, keep the ACA alive, try to stop the taxes, try to do everything in our power to try to keep some semblance of normalcy in this god-awful era that we're living in. And I just want you all to think back 2 years ago, like when Trump won, and I know I was not hopeful at all about flipping the House. I think a lot of people were very wary that it was going to be a really big effort. And here we are today. We've surpassed any expectations. We thought there were 7 possibly viable districts to flip in California because they had a Republican congressperson, but that district voted for Hillary. And as of a couple hours ago, we have now flipped all 7 of those 7. And that is in no small part to all the work that you're all doing. You are showing up week after week. How many of you are tired? Probably not what you expected to be doing during your retirement, I assume. But you're postcarding, you're text banking, you're phone banking, you're driving to Nevada, you're driving down to CA10. Did any of you go down to 21? Yeah, there's a couple of busloads I know that went down from Sacramento. And all that work has paid off. And so now, what we started out was just resisting the Trump. That's what the Indivisible Guide was. And so now we're able to have a whole new Indivisible Guide, and that's Indivisible on Offense, which means we now have some leverage of power in Washington. And so how do we utilize that? How do we push the agenda forward? And even though, we're not going to pass any of these major bills, because even if it, for some reason, passed the Senate, Trump would veto it, we can now start laying the agenda of what we are going to do when we gain power back in 2020 and we have control. And so our first big action is going to be January 3rd, where we go out into the streets, make a very public showing that we are supporting our Democratic members of Congress. A whole lot of them are going from California now. I mean, that's basically a blue caucus that's heading over to DC. And so we're going to be out in the streets showing our support. Right now, currently, is a statewide call for California Indivisible leaders. So I don't know what they're deciding on, but I know that we had some really cool ideas. One of them was everyone go, starting in our northernmost group in CA1, starting a blue wave, like if you're at a sports stadium, and filming clips of groups all the way from CA1 down to San Diego and editing it together so you're showing that California is a big blue wave. That was a really cool idea, so I'm hoping that's what they're choosing, but we'll know more tomorrow about what that event's going to look like. We'll have a toolkit out by the end of the week. And that is the first day that Congress is going to be inaugurated. So we're going to be the first organization out on the ground letting folks know that we weren't here to just flip the houses. We're here to keep those folks accountable. All these new blue members that are going in need to know that we're going to pay attention to what they're doing and make sure that they are keeping up their campaign promises. And they're not just going to DC and getting bought off by lobbyists left and right, that we're still paying attention and we want progressive change and we're going to pay attention and fight for And so that's what next year is going to look like. The first major bill that should be dropping on the House is H.R. 1, and that's going to be a democracy reform bill. So that's things like gerrymandering, voting rights, basically to start to hopefully repealing Citizens United. It's going to be a whole lot of different bills that are focused on democracy and voting rights. And so we're going to be really advocating that that bill is as strong as possible, that it doesn't get watered down. We know it's not going to pass the Senate anyway, so we want it to be as blue and progressive as possible so that we know what we want to put down on the floor in 2020 as well. And then the other thing that we're going to be doing that you all are absolutely vital to is really focus in on state and local work. California was the one state last year that really worked on state and local. And we got a lot of really great progressive bills passed in the legislature, but there's some that unfortunately didn't pass, like AB 3131, which was the first Indivisible sponsored bill. It passed all the way through the legislature and then got vetoed by Governor Brown. But we do have a promise from our new governor, Newsom, that he would not veto that same bill.
What's
So
3131?
it is a bill that requires the police force to have town halls in order to, and go through a lot of different processes if they want to buy military equipment. So essentially what it does is we're trying to limit police forces across California from being able to purchase military grade equipment, because they shouldn't be needing that kind of equipment to protect their towns and communities. And we have a lot of other exciting bills. Right now we're kind of in the process of talking to folks, seeing what you all want to do in California. If you all want to write a bill, we can try to find somebody to sponsor it. That's what we did last year. We'd love to have more than one indivisible bill, but really dive very hard into state and local. And we have indivisibles all across California that are, going to be calling and phone banking their assembly and state senators. But something that you could all do is, if they do postcards, maybe deliver those to their congressman or assembly person on Capitol Hill. So here.
Does that include the judiciary?
Yes. So we are going to be going pretty close into the judiciary next year as well. We have a team on judicial nominations statewide that we're really going to be ramping up. Some of the things that we're going to be working on is census, and as you all probably know, we're redistricting. And so the commission, we start getting commissioners starting in January, like those campaigns go up. So we're going to be writing letters in support of commissioners that we think are on our side, to make sure that when they're redistricting, that it's done right, and that we're not splitting districts up even more and getting some really, troubling districts in our community that are very segregated. So that is all some stuff that's coming up. I'll let Bobby talk a little bit more.
Yeah, perfect segue. Thank you, Chloe. So for those of you who are excited about state and local work, Jiggy, how many of you know Jiggy in the state? Awesome. So Jiggy is our national state and local policy manager. She handles all 50 states, which has been a big lift, but soon she will have help. But she's going to be doing some calls mid-December, the 11th, 12th, and 13th. The one that applies to you all is the 11th, 5:30 Pacific time. She's going to be doing a call for blue state groups to get together and talk about the election, what they did to help win the election, and how they can continue working together and working to improve what we've built upon after the midterms. So I think it's going to be a really great call. I hope all of you are able to join. Zachary, Chloe, and I will be sending out invites for that call. Again, it's December the 11th at 5:30. So I think that's a Tuesday, if I'm correct. If you don't get a link to that, please just let me know. My email is very simple, bobby@indivisible.org, BOBBY. And some of the other exciting things as far as training and tools. So how many people used Van to make phone calls during the election?
Or PDI.
Awesome. Or PDI. Awesome. How many people used Hub Dialer to make those instant calls where you don't even have to dial? Very good. How many used Hustle to do texting? Cool. So the good news is we're going to keep using all of those tools year-round from here on out. For those of you who may have done a little work with us and a little work with the campaign, you may have noticed that once campaigns are over, they're over, and their use of those tools are over. For those of you that used it with us, the good thing is all of the information and all of those conversations, those very important conversations, that we had with voters and volunteers during the election, we get to hold on to that information and continue those conversations with them into next year and more importantly into 2020. So those relationships, those commitments that we've built with those people will continue. We're going to continue to use those tools every year. And starting during the first quarter of 2019, we're also going to introduce the other side of VAN, which is called Every Action. And what that is basically the flip side of My Voters, where you're talking to voters and trying to get them to the polls and get them concerned about the issues. We're going to be, in turn, reaching out to the volunteers, those people who said yes when we knocked on the door, yeah, they want to volunteer with us. Now we're going to reach out to them and get them involved in our groups and start building our groups more and making sure that our groups are sustainable for the future, especially heading into 2020. So that's going to be rolling out then, and with that side of VAN, you'll be able to do things such as have phone banks directly related to reaching out to volunteers, building events within VAN so you can track who came to your events, who didn't show up, and who you need to follow up with, what they did during that event, all of that information that will help you, again, build your group and build events bigger and better in the future.
How many of you have no idea what VAN is or PBI?
Awesome. Yes, thank you for catching that. So VAN is Voter Activation Network. That is basically the tool that most liberal and progressive groups and campaigns use. So if you are a Democrat running during the midterms, you most likely used VAN to reach out to voters and volunteers. And it's also used by nonprofits such as you may have heard of Enroll America during 2013 through 2016. They helped with enrolling people in healthcare coverage for states that did not expand Medicare like California did. So it's used by a lot of groups to make sure that they are able to build those connections and conversations with volunteers and especially voters. So that is a tool that we used this year to much success. It was a big part of the work that you and all of the groups across the country, as far as Indivisible goes, did. So we're going to keep using it, which is an awesome tool to have in our little toolbox year in and year out.
We also, really quickly add, as of today, we have our fundraising tool. I know Indivisible Sacramento is on it. Janessa, is your group on our fundraising tool?
Yes.
Awesome, because all of December we're going to be matching funds dollar to dollar, so up to $500. So spread your links widely in December, and so we can match all those funds. So you can get some extra money in your accounts and have some more fun parties and food and drinks next year.
Yep. Yes, definitely. You should be receiving, if you're a group leader or someone who has already talked to Patrick in the past. Patrick is our distributed funds manager in DC, so he handles anything having to do with fundraising within groups. If you have not heard from him already, you should be getting an email from him if you are part of the distributed funds program. But he'll detail everything in those emails, and again, that's December 1st through 31st, up to $500. So if you raise $500, you're going to get $1,000 in your account.
So how do we know what works and what doesn't work? Like when we spend a lot of time doing postcards, how do we know if we change anybody or we get anybody out there? Does somebody do that sort of research?
Well, postcarding, there's not much research because it's such a new thing. I think a study's about to drop this week because there has been a group that's been studying it. The thing about postcards is because you don't have any kind of answer, it's hard to know. It's hard to track data. What they have found is effective is using postcards as a get out the vote mechanism, just a right before the election reminder last minute vote, and they're going to pay attention to it. But the studies do show that the actual conversation, so the number one most effective tool is canvassing. That door-to-door, face-to-face conversation is always going to be most effective. The second would be phone banking, but there are some studies that are showing that text banking might be catching up, especially because I don't know about you all, but when I was phone banking this election, it's really hard to get through because there's so many disconnected numbers. Most phone banks are connected to landlines, which a lot of folks are just not using these days. And they're transitioning to cell phones. And there's some really hard laws to get around about phone banking cell phones. So text banking has seemed to be more effective than just the number of people you're reaching. It's not going to be as effective a conversation. But there are a lot of studies that do track this kind of stuff about numbers. We're probably going to see for this election. We're only 3 weeks out, so a lot of the information hasn't been concluded. But probably early next year, we'll start to see what was most effective in this past election. But in the past, it was canvassing. Do you know what the number is about how more likely? Is it 15% more likely to go out? I think there's 20% more likely to go vote if it's canvassing. I think it's 15% voting.
Yeah. And the good thing is, because we'll be continuing to use those tools year round, we'll be able to keep tracking that data. I know the data team right now is working very hard on tabulating everything and get everything in order to see the most accurate representation of what our work did during the election. So as Chloe said, for things like canvassing, phone banking, text banking, we can definitely track that. Postcards, again, it's a little bit trickier. There's nothing to move the voter to respond to us when it comes to a postcard. They're not going to send one back. So it's a little bit harder to track info about postcards and how effective they are. But as Chloe said, there are groups and analyst institutes that are studying it because of the phenomenon of how prevalent it was this year during the election. This is probably the most prevalent postcarding has been ever when it comes to elections, simply because it is such an easy way for people who have never done this type of volunteer work to get involved. As Nate said, it's that gateway, and I think that's very true. It's a very easy way for people who may be introverts or who have just, again, never done this work to kind of get their feet wet, get in the door, find out what it's about, get comfortable with the language and how we approach voters and what we talk to them about. So once those studies come out, we'll definitely be looking at them and finding out how we can implement them into Indivisible's national and local strategy.
And we do know in California, we do know what our numbers were for groups that were calling through our tools. And some of these races, on election night, we knew that there was 2 definite house flips, 48 Ruta and Katie Hill. We didn't know for, it's now 3 weeks that the last 5 races have come through positive for Democrats. And we can see how close those races are and how many folks we called or how many folks' doors we knocked on. Harley Ruta, for example, in the primary, won by 125 votes over his opponent, Hans Kierstead, who was endorsed by the Democratic Party.